Our nation is in trouble. I'm talking about our government and our culture. And the only one answer to what we are facing is Jesus. Jesus said in John chapter 12, verse 32, "And when I am lifted up, I will draw all men unto me." We need to lift up Jesus in our nation and across the world. So we will be considering the politics and cultural issues of our day in light of God's Word. So today, let's consider this. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Consider This. I'm your host, Keith Allen, and the purpose of this show is to lift up Jesus Christ in our nation and hopefully across the world. I say this every week. This is not an opinion show. The only opinion that matters is God's. So today, let's consider this. If I were a senator in Texas. Yes, it's going to be a fun one today. Let's just start with our foundational scripture. And I'm in the book of Psalms, the NIV version, chapter 35, verses 18. I will give you thanks in the great assembly among throngs of people. I will praise you. That's Psalm 35 and 18. Keep that kind of in your conscience as we go through today, because foundationally, that's a scripture that God actually put on my heart several years ago as I started contemplating, do I want to run for a political office at some point? And so I'll just start with this. This last weekend, actually yesterday, my wife and I were invited to this local barbecue, really for, several political candidates, members of the GOP Republican Party down here on the border. And there were several people that are currently running for office in 2026. There was certainly some city council members running, school board member, and there was actually a House of Representatives candidate that'll be running in 2026. And the purpose really was just kind of this get together. And there was only, 15, 20 people there, but each one had an opportunity to kind of get up and say, hey, here's who I am, and here's what I stand for, etc. And then they'd open it up if anybody had any questions. And there weren't very many questions out there, quite frankly. But as each one of them got up, I waited till the last one, but I had this question in my mind, and I asked a question that, honestly, I wish I had asked each one of the candidates. But I asked it the last one, and I'll leave the person unnamed, because the person and the office they were running for wasn't that important to me. It was more the question that I asked. I said, hey, when you get to the office you're seeking, what is it that you're passionate about? So tell me the one or two or three things that you would say, I want to go impact this, whatever this is. And it was interesting because, first of all, in business, that's a question that you ask. And, honestly, the answer from this person, when I asked the question, I say this a lot and I get laughed at work, but the answer was kind of like, well, or but, but. And anytime somebody starts to answer a question, they're searching for either what you want to hear or, boy, I don't know how to answer this. And that's kind of how this came off. I'm not saying all the candidates would have been this way, but this one certainly was. And as I thought about what the other two had kind of spoke to, I had kind of the same thoughts, like, I wonder how they would have answered that question. And what was really funny is we leave this place and we go home, and, I'm talking to Judy about it when we get home. We're just hanging out in the kitchen, and she kind of put it to me. She says, well, tell me something. She says, if you had got up there, if you were running for Senate, because I think a lot of I'm contemplating running for the U.S. Senate seat in Texas. John Cornyn's seat is up in 2026. Many of you know I'm contemplating taking a run and primarying him in March. And she said, how would you have answered that question? And, I talk politics with her all the time. She's pretty well versed in politics. But I think what she was asking is, hey, are you pretty sharp on what your point of view is? I thought it was a great question. And so I just thought, with this episode today, I thought it would be good for me to kind of share with you all. If I was running for Senate, if I were a senator representing the great state of Texas, what would be important to me? And, what would I stand for? And I guess I would just say, overarching, first things first. I am a Christian, so I am obviously driven by my Christian values and my relationship with Jesus Christ. That will never change, and I am unapologetically pro-life. But before anything, I am a Christian. And then, as I just think about, well, what are the 3 or 4 things that are most important to me? I'll go through some of these things a little more granular, but for me, it's real simple. I have 4 things that are always on my mind. One, I am absolutely a fiscal conservative. Number 2, I believe deeply in protecting our children. So the protection of our children and parental rights. And I'll tell you what that means in a minute. And then, obviously, if you know me, I am a staunch supporter of our Second Amendment and law and order in our city down here. I live on the border. I love the Rio Grande Valley, but certainly for the state of Texas and our nation. And then, lastly, I believe in border security, and I think we still have a ways to go, whether it's border security. But in addition to that, at some point, we have to really have immigration reform in our country, which certainly will impact the state of Texas. So I just thought I was going to go through some of these things. Somebody asked me the other day, like, are you one of those MAGA people? Well, actually, yes, I am. I am a proud supporter of Donald Trump and the MAGA movement. I think that Donald Trump, if you say, what do you think of Donald Trump? People have a lot of opinions. Here's what I'll tell you. Here's mine. And remember I told you the only opinion that matters is God's? Here's what I'll tell you. I think Donald Trump absolutely loves our country. And he looks at what he's been able to accomplish in his life and with his family. And he says, I want that for others. That's how great our nation is. One day, if you hear my story, I will tell you, I lost my parents at a young age. And I've been fighting all my life. But because of the goodness of the country we live in, I've been able to, I've fought my whole life, but guess what? I've had a lot of success. I've been married for 35 years, 4 beautiful children, all 4 of them went to college, and I can say, you know what? That's because of the opportunities that are available in this nation. So I share that with Donald Trump. I absolutely love our country. But I want to give you just a little bit I want to put some meat on the bones of those 4 things I kind of talked about. One, just from a fiscal conservative standpoint, I mean, I'm not going to get into like all the crazy money we've spent. If I was to say, what bugs me about our current senator in Texas, I love Ted Cruz. I'm a Ted Cruz fan. When I look at John Cornyn, which is the seat that if I decide I'm going to run, that's the seat I'm going to go after. If you look at the voting record there, what you'll see is he's a senator. I'm not talking about him personally. What I would say is his voting record, 64% of the time he votes Republican. When you look at Ted Cruz, 98% of the time he votes Republican. So pretty easy, easy choice to make there. But when you look at what John Cornyn has voted for, every bill that's come up in the last several years that has been about giving money to Ukraine, other countries, omnibus bills, he has always voted for it. That's opposite of what I am. I am a fiscal conservative. I think when I look at what DOGE has been doing with our current administration, what they've been able to do with DOGE, they've uncovered, and they're still uncovering, so much fraud, waste, abuse. And if I said, do I believe that's happening in Texas? Maybe not at the same scale, but I guarantee you there's some of that in our great state as well. And I do want to just make a couple of points out of when I think of fiscal conservative, think about small business. The state of Texas, this is some interesting stats. We have 3.1 million small businesses in the state of Texas. That makes up 99.8% of our businesses. So should we be supporting and protecting them? Absolutely. Let me give you just a few things that are on my brain. If I were a senator in Texas, here's what I'd be fighting for. Get rid of taxes on owned inventory. We're one of the states that charges a franchise tax. When we look at compliance burdens, get rid of the unnecessary compliance burdens. These are all things that cost small businesses a lot of money, and it burdens them to the point where they can't grow either at all, or certainly they can't expand as fast as they'd like to. What I would propose is, what I would fight for is, we need to lower the cost for these small businesses to borrow money so that they can expand faster. And then if you look at what's the biggest burden on small businesses in the state of Texas, but certainly in the country, 41% of the businesses will tell you the biggest burden they have is health insurance. So we live in a state with a lot of surplus dollars. Could our state incentivize small businesses through helping with health insurance costs? There's a way to do this, which would cause what? More jobs, better business in our state. And I think in the long haul, that would be a very, very good investment. I also think about things like Texas is always known as the energy state, if you will. We got so much oil, we got so much gas and oil under our feet. But you think about things like nuclear energy. We have 2 nuclear power centers in our state with 4 nuclear reactors. You compare that to Illinois, who leads the nation. Can you believe that? They're less than half the size of Texas. They're leading the nation. They have 6 nuclear power plants and 11 reactors. We shouldn't be behind anybody, much less Illinois. And then there's something that's on the horizon. A lot of people aren't talking about this geothermal energy. We are the best at drilling. We are the most experienced, and our geography here with the climate we have, we are the best positioned to go after the geothermal energy industry. We have the experience, we have the technology, we have the expertise. We should absolutely be leading the nation in geothermal energy and energy development. We should be leading the nation in this. So these are things when I look at Texas and say, I'm a fiscal conservative. I also understand, yes, you want to save money, but where are you investing for the short term and the long term? And then just a simple note, just something that's always kind of bothered me for the last several years with the blackouts and things we've had in Texas. We are the only state in the nation that has a power grid, and we are not connected to the nation's power grid. And it's easy, some of us in Texas, to say, yeah, we're on our own. But the truth is, we should be connected to the national power grid. Otherwise, we're vulnerable. I'm not saying get rid of our own. We can strengthen our own, and we can be connected to the national. So in business, we say it's not an or strategy, it's an and strategy. And I think those are some of the things that we should be looking at when I think about fiscal conservatism. Is yes, let's save money, but at the same time, let's invest, let's do it smart, and let's build for the future, which brings jobs to Texas, which brings money to Texas, which brings inflation down in Texas. And certainly, I'm one that believes Texas should lead the nation in everything. We will have such population growth. We are already getting population and job growth right now. Imagine when we start to really put our foot on the pedal for driving our energy in the state of Texas. And then second, I believe, I said earlier, I am a staunch supporter of protecting our children and parental rights. I think most of you would know what I mean by that. Do I believe in school choice? I absolutely believe in school choice. Why? I believe, first of all, if the tax dollars follow the student, you create competition. You create competition, you increase the quality of the product. In this case, you increase the quality of learning. there's a lot of, teachers unions. I was talking to a teacher earlier today or yesterday, and she said, yeah, the teachers need more money. And it's like, okay, well, I kind of agree with that. What I agree with is the better teachers deserve more money. The better learning institutions deserve more money. That's what school choice causes. But I also think outside of that, when I think about what's taught in our schools, we're lucky down here in the Rio Grande Valley. There's not a lot of this, but in the state of Texas, what I would tell you is I think we've got to stop this sex education in our schools. When I went to school as a younger guy, we had health education. You had health class. And I think that's good. Somehow over time, that has transitioned. Now it's sex education. We're talking about gender ideology. We're talking about homosexuality and trying to teach this stuff in our schools. Keep that out of our schools. Parents can talk about that at home where they determine it makes sense. That stuff should not be in the curriculum of our schools. And then I just don't believe in this whole puberty blocking drugs for young kids, gender changing surgery for our children. If it's under 18 years old, I'd say you can't touch them. As a society, we should be protecting our children. There's a Psalm 127:3, that tells you children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from Him. Children are very, very important to God. When you think of scriptures where He says, train up a child in the way he should go, well, it's because there's an expectation of parents with the children. It's not for the schools to determine anything about our children. There's states, I think you guys know it out there, in California, if a child goes to a 12-year-old kid goes to their teacher and says, I know I'm a boy, but I think I'm a girl and I want to be called Susie, those teachers don't have to tell the parents. That's baloney. So yes, I'm for school choice, but broadly I'd say I'm for protecting our children and parents' rights for their children. And then, I don't have to tell anybody this, I'm a big Second Amendment supporter, and I just want to read it so everybody knows, Second Amendment and law and order, but December 15th, 1791, here's what the Second Amendment was ratified as: a well-regulated militia being, underline the word, necessary to the security of a free state. It's what we are. The right, underline right, it's not a privilege. The right of the people to keep, meaning to own, to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Again, this is a right. It's not a privilege. And I don't mean to go after Cornyn so hard here, but I will just say this. In 2022 is the first time since 1994 that there was any major gun legislation passed. This guy, senator from Texas, co-sponsors a bill with the Democrats for gun control and gets it passed. And all I can tell you is, first of all, that doesn't fit Texas values. And anytime you start eroding the rights, and that's what it is, the rights of gun owners, whether it's red flag laws, additional taxes on the ammunition, anything you're doing to inhibit that right, that freedom, I have a problem with it. And if you just go in context and say, well, why would he do that? Well, many of you remember the tragic shooting at the Uvalde school here in Texas. There was a lot of pressure. Hey, we got to do something. We got to do something. Let me tell you, Ted Cruz, the other senator in Texas, he didn't vote for it for the right reason. What he said was, hey, this gun bill that John Cornyn is actually sponsoring and co-sponsoring, not one thing in it would have prevented that Uvalde shooting. So all I can say is we got a guy in there currently that if you say, what do I think of John Cornyn? I don't know him personally. He's probably a nice guy. Would I vote differently than him? I absolutely would, especially when it comes to fiscal conservatism, giving our money away, protecting our dollars, fighting for Texas, and then certainly the rights to a Second Amendment. And then just law and order as a whole.
I think there should be mandatory prison sentences if you commit a crime against a member of law enforcement, and that's inclusive of our border agents. I think there should absolutely be standard mandatory sentencing for these crimes. And when it comes to, I think you murder a police officer, a border agent, a member of the judiciary, I think it should be an automatic death penalty trial. That's what I think. And then when I think about law and order, I think about something that happened here in our city not too long ago. But I'm a firm believer in the First Amendment and the right to assemble. But just keep this in mind. The First Amendment says you have a right to peaceful assembly. And when I see what's going on in our college campuses, when I see what happens in our major cities, I mean, we could go back to the George Floyd days, but I'll just go to something real recent here. When we started deporting, when the Trump administration started deporting illegal immigrants down here in McAllen, Texas, where I live, there was a big protest. And the protest got so big that they were actually blocking 10th Street, which is a big street. It's a main thoroughfare down here. They were blocking the street, I don't know, for an hour or so. And the local police, and I believe mayor, made a decision to say, well, you know, we don't want to cause trouble. We're going to let them do it, you know, and let it pass. And I say, no stinking way. Why would you do that? When you allow civil disobedience like that, you invite more. That should have been shut down immediately. And I could say that about all these protests, the things that I see, you know, in our college campuses, and sometimes it's not even a college campus. All I'd say is, if you want to have peaceful protests, shoot Howie, I'm all about that. But when you start inhibiting the ability for people to go to school, for ambulances to get by, for people to drive down the street to go to work or visit relatives or whatever, I have a problem with that. When we say we're a society of law and order, we shut that stuff down. There's ways of doing that are peaceful. And then finally, and I've said this before, the 13th chapter of Romans says the government doesn't bear the sword in vain. In other words, the government has a responsibility to keep law and order. And I don't think that always happens in our nation, and certainly not in our state. I just saw it down here. And then finally, border security and immigration. I'll give you the bullet points real quick in the interest of time. 1, yes, finish building the wall. But add advanced technology, not just drone technology. There's a lot more out there that people know about that we haven't even talked about. I think we have to go full on with that. I think we've got to invest. I think Texas needs to lead the efforts to secure the border for Texas. Let us be an example for the rest of them. I think there does, and I said this with law and order, there needs to be mandatory sentences and penalty for those who violate our laws. And now I'm talking specifically about those who cross our border illegally. They are committing a criminal act. And I think the very first time there should be a permanent ban that says you do it one time, you will never be a U.S. citizen because you've told us what your character is. And then I'm a firm believer in the deportation. I think we've got to address things with compassion. I think we've got to address things with common sense. But I think we also have to be bold. And when I think about something as complex as DACA, DACA is complex. There's people here, they were brought to this country when they were, you know, a month old. And they've been here their whole lives for 25 years. Do I believe that person, we got to send them back? Of course not. We have to figure it out. It's not an easy one. There's not an easy answer there. But think about it. You heard it when Clinton was in office. You heard it when Obama was in office. You heard it when Trump was in office the first time. You heard it with Biden in office. You got Trump in office now. 6 different cycles. And nobody has been able to nobody has grabbed this bull by the horns and said, we need to put this to rest. They keep kicking the can down the road. Here's what I'll tell you. It's a federal issue. It does impact the state of Texas. If I were in the Senate representing the state of Texas, I promise you, I would get a hold of it and say, let's figure it out. It's not going to be easy, but we need to figure it out. And there's a lot of things like that. And then lastly, I'd just say, and I know this is a federal issue, but I think that at some point, and I say it's got to happen soon, we have to address immigration reform across the board. Currently, there's 6 ways to get into our country as a citizen. And we've got to streamline that and say, here's how you get into the United States of America as a citizen. And I can tell you this, many, many nations have moved to merit-based immigration. I think we need to also. And then lastly, I'll just say this, there's national priorities that I would talk about too. If I were running for Senate, for the U.S. Senate, representing the great state of Texas, the other thing I'll tell you is I believe the elections in 2026, the last 2 years of this presidency are going to be tough because the Democrats are going to start rising up. And I'm going to tell you, they're going to make it real, real tough because they don't want another Republican in office. Remember, I've told you for a year and a half now, it's all about money and power when it comes to Washington, especially the Democrats. My goal, if I was to go back to where we started, Psalm 35:18. First things first, and we all know this, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. Psalm 35:18 says, I will give you thanks in the great assembly. Among throngs of people, I will praise you. The great assembly for me in this nation is our nation's capital. If we could change the hearts of our people, of our lawmakers, and I'm saying Democrat, Republican, Independents, if we as a nation have a heart towards Jesus, our nation gets a whole lot better really, really fast. But we've got to have Christians that are willing to stand up boldly and fight. Again, last year, what I say, it's time for Christians to wake up. This year, I'm saying it's time for Christians to boldly stand up. So if you read an underlining message underneath of my podcast today, it's one of those shoe fits, wear it conversations. But Judy and I are in deep conversations, deep prayer. We are truly seeking the Lord, and I would appreciate your prayers as well. So as always, God bless you. I love you. If you want to get a hold of us, you can go to our website, considerthispodcast.net. There's some real cool swag on there for small donations. Shipping's included. We got hats, we got t-shirts, we got hoodies, we got whatever. I'd love you to reach out to me. You can hit us up on email as well, kallen@considerthispodcast.net. And until next week, God bless you, and we will talk to you then.